Rams and Chargers. Yesterday was a very big day for us because if anyone lives in LA, you've heard that live entertainment is not going to happen for 2020, but then the NFL released their schedule last night, which means we're still hoping that there are games going on. So hopefully everyone will see us starting in September at the new SoFi Stadium project. Prior to this, I got my start as a customer service representative at the San Diego Padres. Quickly learned that I did not like having people having my phone number. There's only so many times that I can tell people that you cannot bring a water bottle into the ballpark and the gates open 2.5 hours beforehand. So I transitioned at the Padres to help out with our CRM team a little bit more when it was in the infancy of what CRM actually was and what it is today. So it was a lot of manual data entry, and it was just something that got me off the phones and gave me a little bit more insight into what data could actually be. So that's where I started to kind of get more and more involved with what data could do for a sports organization. From there, I hit a glass ceiling essentially at the Padres and applied for Major League Baseball Advanced Media, moved out to New York for the first time at 23 and got to work with all 30 baseball teams, which my mom likes to call my MBA in baseball because that just means I got to meet everyone and know what every team was doing, and basically, got thrown to the wolves to understand what they were doing. And at that point, it was the first time that we were doing any sort of analytics on the secondary market for any baseball team. So really, I was looking at StubHub data for all 30 teams and trying to identify any sort of theme that was going on there. And then I realized I didn't like snow because I'm from California, and a job with the San Francisco Giants came up and went over there to be a revenue data analyst. And they were just building out Salesforce, so they needed someone to do that. And since my position was new for them, they just put that under me as well. So I got to learn how to Apex code in Salesforce and SQL code to put together tickets.com databases with PRM and marketing analytics. And from there, apparently I was doing a good job because I got a call from Legends. And as soon as the Chargers announced that they were going to share a stadium with the Rams in LA, they needed someone else to come and help kind of separate the two teams' data and make inferences off of both without being an internal party for each of those. So that's currently where I'm at today. I get to make decisions for 2 NFL football teams based on the business side. So pretty cool way to get all the way around the United States.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Cynthia, do you want to go next?
Sure. Right now, I work for the NFL Network. I'm our on-air predictive analytics expert. It's probably easier to say expert than analyst because predictive analytics analyst is a mouthful. So I got a promotion because of that. I essentially talk about the strategy and potential numbers to look for, connecting football fans with what they might see in games. So everything from fantasy football to what a projected score might be going forward in a game on later on Sunday. So I'm on Game Day Morning, which is on Sunday mornings, Fantasy Live, and a bunch of other shows that are peppered throughout our network schedule. Right now it's a little dicey because obviously the schedule came out yesterday. Usually we have like a schedule release show that's in the studio, but with everything going on, it's been a lot more remote, which has been really interesting from the standpoint of like what's going to happen. And I'm sure Amy and I are facing a lot of the same questions, and she probably has to do a lot more advanced modeling than I do because I don't have to deal with ticket sales, which is great. So we should really ask her about that. In addition to that, so my background is when I got out of school, I started in a banking capacity. It was like not necessarily in sports at all. I liked sports always, but I was really evaluating tech at the time only. And by the way, that was a long time ago when Facebook was like considered kind of the same as other things that we would completely put in different categories now. So you're looking at how to make a tech investment back in 2005 when I graduated college, and the whole world was different because remember, that was before the other kind of big economic thing that happened in 2008, right? So then I went to business school, and in business school, I actually cold emailed so in between your summer, if you're not super familiar with business school, in between your first and second year summer is your really important internship. That's when you typically, if you're full-time, you typically go to the company that you're auditioning for in order to work for full-time. So I cold emailed the CFO of the NFL at the time. His name is Anthony Noto. He's now the CEO of SoFi, which is in the fintech space. But at the time he was the CFO of the NFL, and asked if I could do something in finance for him. I was familiar with him because he had come from Goldman Sachs. Recently, he become the CFO. He was in research, in equity research, so I was familiar with how he worked. So he gave me an opportunity to work at the NFL, where I worked on a project that really changed things for me, which was season inventory restructuring. So how many games should there be preseason and regular season to optimize the revenue for the NFL? So 16-4 is what we have right now. Should it be 17-3? What are potentially different ways for the NFL to earn more money and put the best product on the field? And the best product was competitive games longer into the season. So working on that project allowed me to really have the first piece of putting like what is on field dynamics, like what is statistics and all of the things that we know about what happens on field. How does that translate to the bottom line, to financial, revenues, financial, windfalls? Where can we generate more money? So I got a chance to work with a competition committee and these coaches who, we watched film, and I was able to kind of figure out that if I could write better models, financial models that translated what these coaches said in football terms, then I could be like a really important piece in this equation. So in addition to finishing business school, I added a master's of predictive analytics. So that's where I got my first foray into coding and understanding why. Now I'm probably like the only person who writes code that's like, I'm an awful coder, but I'm just know enough to be dangerous. I know how it all works, and I know how to do just enough for what I need. I hack my own life, right? But in order to, understand how to do things faster, quicker, better, and really take what the football coaches and players and the like all of the different necessary like key performance indicators that these people needed and turn them into something usable, I needed to learn how to use a database faster. So coding helped me. And then so getting out of business school was when that last recession, whatever we're in now, I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but when things were tough last time. And it was also coincidentally the last, when the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement for the NFL was going on. So the NFL was like, we can't full time, we don't know what's going on. So I also worked on a project with Disney, and Disney hired me full time to do strategy in a more technology capacity business development. At Disney, business development is not sales, it's strategy. So other people call it strategy. So where do you make the investment? How much do you make? And I did it on digital and tech, with a digital and tech focus. So it's at Disney in Burbank, then went to ESPN to do something similar with a lot of metadata tagging. If you really want to get into some sexy Googling, Google metadata video tagging circa 2012, hot. And then ultimately, when Paul DePodesta got hired by the Browns, ESPN was like, well, maybe we should talk about how all this Moneyball stuff works really. And so I got a chance at that point to start talking about what analytics were in terms of performance analytics. And then DraftKings came along and they're like, well, we need some more here. Our ads need to be more integrated. And then I was really the only one who could sort of talk about this interplay between how do you have an edge in playing this new game and what's going on. And ultimately turned that into a whole, way of talking about the fun part of sports strategy related to advanced data. So that kind of leads me back to the NFL, where now instead of going horizontally and touching a lot of different sports, but not super deep, I get to go super deep into one vertical, my favorite vertical. When I got back to the NFL network, the people at the NFL, because many were the same as when I was there the first time, you're home, welcome home. So in that capacity, I'm able to work on telling football stories on camera, but also working with football teams behind the scenes to help them really innovate in the analytics space. Last year I got a chance to help someone hire a person. It's hard to, I can't say anything about it. It's very secret. It's a little Fight Club. But ultimately, behind the scenes, I get a chance to help analytics grow as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then I just wanted to respond to one thing you said, Cynthia. I know we have a bunch of graduates here right now who, like you said, you graduated from business school when it was 2008 and it was the financial crisis then, and we have some people graduating now. So what advice do you for graduates looking to find a job during the age of COVID?
I mean, if you're in tech right now, it seems like, at least from some of these outward indicators, the NASDAQ being the biggest one, there's a lot of opportunity in tech, and there's always going to be a lot of opportunity. Like, I got the best piece of advice ever when I was coming out, when I was trying to figure out like how to navigate my career about 10 years ago. It was like, go where the cranes are. Like, where are people building stuff? Where are people investing? And right now, technology could actually be one of the beneficiaries, or the, it's lit a fire. It's a catalyst for increased tech growth quicker. So if you don't need it to be necessarily sports or necessarily something that's very, I would widen my focus, because there's a lot of cool companies doing amazing things that could be adjacent to sports and still be super interesting. So I would say focus on the technology part and learn something and make yourself different and interesting in a time when it's very hard. So congratulations on picking tech before, and it's a smart place to be in. It's not a lot of women, so you get a chance to stand out from the crowd right from the jump, but also it's a growing and evolving space. So I would just say, like, be really honest with yourself about where you can contribute right now, and then create plans. Like, think of things in 2 to 3 year increments, right? If you're just getting out of school, you don't need your dream job yet. Sorry, that's not a very like sunshine thing to say, but you can grow into your dream job. Sometimes doing things to get the skills to accumulate such valuable assets for yourself, nobody can take that away from you. So they can't take away your degree. They can't take away what you learned. I would give up. I hated writing my first financial models. Hated it. I did not know I was like, what is a WAC, right? I'm like Googling these things, but it's so good for you to have to go through that and learn those things. I would have never said like financial modeling, super sexy first job, right? But being able to take those skills, no one can take them away from you. So get near what you want and think 2 to 3 year increments. What am I going to learn? How am I going to contribute? Who am I going to be around? Who you're around matters so much. So value those things more than the word sports.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, even just looking at the list of people who are on this call, like, I can see people from every single job that I've had in sports on here. So thank you guys for coming to see me. I know you've probably heard me talk before, but it's such a small community that as soon as you get your foot in the door and just meet the people, and it's essentially still going to be a graduate school, even when you get into sports, it's your class. The people that you meet now are going to go off and in different tangents, in different ways, in different teams. You're going to have people all over the country that are going to have your back. So as soon as you get in, just make sure that the people that are around you know that you're a good worker, know that you work hard, and that's going to do so many good things for you down the road, that even though you don't have the job you want right now, someone is going to go out and make it an influence, and you can do the same thing for them, and you kind of just grow together.
No, I love that. I think that's so important. When I first graduated, I was really impatient, and I never thought I'd go into tech, but Cynthia, I agree. I think I saw the opportunity there, and sport has always been a passion throughout my life. And no, that's awesome for all of us to hear. Our next question for you is, what's a typical day like in your job, pre-COVID and then during COVID?
Oh boy. I think everyone knows in tech that nothing's really a typical day anymore. Basically, if you understand how to put things together, everyone's going to come to you. So even when someone goes out and makes their own decision to start a new initiative, they're always going to come back to you because you're going to be the doer. And I think that's kind of what my department sees every day, is that someone has a plan. We have to be the people who figure out how to operate it and how to go from there. So that's always the fun part, is that you never know what's going to come to you, but at least you know that people are going to come to you because you're the one who's going to put everything into action and can put some spin on it. Even if you're not the decision maker at the moment, they're still going to come to you and see what you need to do. So basically, like, if we want to look at a day to day, talking about email marketing that needs to go out, what lead generation tools are we using to get more leads from the draft or the schedule release back to the Rams and Chargers, who's actually warmed up enough to go into the sales pipeline, because the last thing you want to do is immediately try to convert people from just a brand engager to an immediate sale. Like, you need to warm them up. Some people, we're getting better and better tools to actually let the customer tell you when they want to buy, rather than put out email blasts and just say, here's everyone who looks like they can buy. You kind of have to let them tell you by their engagement and move themselves down the funnel instead of forcing them, because that's where you're just going to get a sales team of 800 people that are just going to make cold calls, and you're going to lose more fans than you gain that way because you're just bothering people at this point instead of letting them go. And then, of course, making sure that the inventory and Ticketmaster is always going to be aligned with everything that we're doing. And then new fun thing that I get to learn on my job is now I'm in charge of all the finances. So much like what Cynthia gets to do, making sure that all of our financial reconciliations are intact every month before we get audited every year, which I'm currently in my audit. So I get auditors emailing me every day now telling me why, or asking me why these contracts, or if they do or do not match up. So just because you're in data doesn't mean you have to just be in tech. Now I'm in finance because I know all the data. I put together all the data sectors, and I can then put them back out to our auditors to make sure that our loan for the entire stadium stays afloat. So just a few $1 billion back and forth, you know, really easy things to think about. So that's a normal day.
So I'm gonna sound like horribly like not sophisticated after that. Okay, so 2 different types of days. During the season, my day starts off like in the mornings. I'll get up and make sure, like, I have to write code every day. So usually I write code, I go to bed, or I write code, then I like wait half an hour, make sure it looks like it's all like running simulations. I run a lot of Monte Carlo simulations every night, make sure everything's like working, right? So sometimes I'll freak out and wake up in the middle of 2 a.m., think whatever. But I wake up in the morning, make sure all the everything I need to have for, you know, during the season when we're steady state, you know, you have games on Mondays, Thursdays, Sundays. So ultimately you're tracking all of this information. Plus I tell stories on TV. So sometimes my producer will be like, hey, we really want to do something on Drew Brees and Tom Brady week 1. Guarantee that's coming, right? So we'll have to look through a bunch of different ways of kind of looking at all this data. And instead of telling this tale of like, oh, they've, you know, they're the passing leaders in yards and passing leader in touchdowns, and that's the story. Like, yeah, that might be the story, but like, what's a more interesting story? So we look for different angles, and so I'll have to code whatever. So then I'll get up in the morning, make sure everything's like good, and then I'll work out. I really have to stay disciplined with that because my mind needs it, right? Then I'll go into the studio and I'll have, you know, the prep that goes on. So you have like a pre-show meeting where you go through everything that's going to go on in the show, and, you know, you talk it through, you make adjustments, you make sure that, like, we have like, so in these meetings, you'll have everyone from graphics to a producer, and make sure everything's kind of in lockstep. So you're communicating from like that point, right? Then you do some prep and some writing. You go through and make sure, like, you know, if I had an article that I had written the night before, what time is it getting posted? Because then we can sync it up with this hit or that hit, all these different, you know, kind of TV things that happen during the day. And then you have your show, and then after the show, then you do things like you write an article because you want to reinforce, kind of give people that are watching that they want to see, like, how did you come up with this number? Like, what do any of these numbers mean? So writing has been, I'm not a writer. It makes me anxious to start, but it's been very good for me to take myself outside that comfort zone and have to, you know, I write sometimes long form, sometimes short form, but you try to connect with the audience to explain a little bit of why. And then I take calls, you know, for my side hustle, right? My business or whatever. So, you know, it's you take calls, you try to like stay on top of what's going on with new technologies available. You try to understand, okay, what are the coding languages that I need to know? So sometimes my like business development calls will be with my old professors from Northwestern to be like, hey, what's the next thing happening with code? What's going on? Like, hey, what does this database mean? Or I've read about this thing on, you know, Synopsys Digital. What is it? You know, like, or Morning Brew, like, what, I don't understand. So trying to keep myself ahead of the game in terms of what's coming, what's happening, what's out there. And then, you know, go home and kind of write the code and do it all over again. During the off season, that shifts more from the, you know, the TV priorities to working with teams. So outlining a project to solve with the team. Hey, Cynthia, of these low cost running backs, here's 5. Give us your assessment of which one, you know, how much we could get for each one and which one would fits most with our offense and given our particular needs. Help us prioritize this. Okay, so work on that. That requires coding and writing and creating decks and things that, you know, just never go away, right? Like they never go away. I thought I would never have to make a deck again, but, you know, that doesn't happen.
I made so many so far. They never end, ever.
Never end. The never ending. So, you know, in Corona situation, it's been a lot more focused on the BD parts and trying to create new sort of content and data use cases, and then also working with teams and less TV, because we don't have any TV that's coming from the studio anymore. And so like the few things that I get to do from like this basically, there's just not as many as normal. So been trying to reallocate my time to spend it in ways to try to create some growth for myself, for others, for kind of the whole business. So that's kind of the difference.
That's incredible. You guys are definitely masters of time management. That's definitely an essential skill to have. And I heard Cynthia, someone was telling me you run your
it off sometimes. I think
I was just gonna I wonder how you balance it all out. But someone told me, Cynthia, you're training, like you're doing a marathon in each state. So you fit in marathon training too. Jeez.
Yeah, so I'm 23 states in. I am not a model for how to train for marathon. You can ask several people on this call, including my mother, who I see. I just do like a good job of like, I pick the marathon and we go and we have a good time there. I'm not trying to win, but you know, I wouldn't recommend my strategy, which is basically just go do it. Not a good strategy. So I've had some of them have been, I've trained more for or less, but it's a time. I do kind of stay like, you know, I've made, I didn't used to like running at all. And then I made this crazy goal. And so now I feel like I have to do it. But, you know, obviously it would be a little better if we were, it's a little bit crazy goal, but I figure if it doesn't happen, then it's like, well, at least I've already run 23 marathons, right? So, so it's good.
So cool. And Amy and Cynthia, could you guys kind of walk us through that process of teaching yourself how to code?
Oh, so much trial and error. I think, so basically what really prompted me to want to do it is, one, Excel just wasn't fast enough. And when you're starting to look at data sets where it crashes your Excel, so you have hundreds of thousands of rows of data, you can't export that out and do anything with it anymore in real time. So when I got to the Giants, I didn't really get a lot of help from my IT department because I was building out a new CRM system that was going against their homegrown one. So they weren't really on board with helping with it. So what I did was I started just basically going through the Microsoft suite and graduated from Excel to Access. And basically what Access does is allows you to drag and drop any sort of inner joins between, and you can visually see it. And then if you hit a button, it'll show you the SQL code that actually would be that what you just did. So it kind of shows you visually, but then teaches you how to actually build out the language. So from there, I just jumped straight into then SQL. If I knew enough about inner joins and which tables I wanted to see, I kind of just went from there. Google is so helpful. Every time that it gives you an error, you're just like, what does this mean? And Google is a great teacher. And then my IT department then came back in and said like, okay, we see you doing that. So I would write maybe 50 lines of code and send it to them and be like, this isn't doing what I want it to do. What am I missing? And they're much better at, you know, nesting code within or calls within a different one. And I'm usually just like, let me build a temp table and then meet another one. So still pretty much a hack job whenever I try to do that. But I think SQL is like Latin for code. If you know SQL, you can kind of translate that into almost any other platforms. I know a lot of people went to R and now they're skipping over into Python, and I still haven't made that jump yet, just because the data sources that I'm using, they only give you data in a SQL format. So there's no real reason for me to jump into another one when Ticketmaster is going to give me 300 tables in my SQL database, and then I have to move that again into a Python database. So I've just kind of stuck with SQL the entire time. Still not great at it, so please don't ask me to teach you it. Evan, I'm sorry, I know you're on this, and I'm supposed to be teaching him. I'm not super great. But yeah, it's still a work in progress. You're always going to learn something new, but the biggest thing is just knowing where your data lives. So as long as you can figure out which columns to pull and what actually makes that, so it's a little bit more data science than actual coding, but what actions make your data change is probably the better thing to learn. Because if you're going to try to code something and you don't know that expanding out a package in Ticketmaster updates all of your date ones, and it looks like you just sold 7,000 seats today when really you just expanded something, that's going to throw off all of your models too. So take some time to really learn what your data does and how it changes prior to just only jumping straight into code.
That's great advice, Amy. And I think like SQL, like at least for me, has been, you can do so much in it now that like we don't even realize. And like most of the cloud databases now have like SQL in memory. So SQL in memory machine learning models, which is like you could just write a SQL query and then run a model on it.
Yeah.
But I am a big Python over R proponent. I see someone on my team here and everyone knows I will not a big fan of R, but Cynthia, it would be great to hear a little bit from you, and then we can move on so that we can get to our other questions too.
So I love how both of you talked about, so there you have kind of a chicken and an egg problem with all data, right? Like if, like you're talking about, Amy, if Ticketmaster is giving you the information in SQL, you are wasting your time trying to create everything in R or Python, because right now that's like, where is your data coming from? What do you want it to do? So I always try to like, because I'm like, obviously I paid a lot of money for, higher education. So I try to use it, but that's neither here nor there. But ultimately, try to like take it from the top down, right? Like, what's the question? What problem am I trying to solve? What resources do I have in order to solve it? And like, am I optimizing how I'm doing it? But you have to kind of do it in that order, because if you build it bottom up and you force it to go through R when you don't have the R, you could be wasting tons of time. Or Python, the same thing could be said for SQL. So you really need to match what you're doing with what you'd like your outcome to be. So taking the time to understand both what are and are not the kind of requirements. Like if you want everything in Excel, if Excel is going to do it for you, fine, right? Like don't go trying to learn, like try to figure out what are the steps and what are the capabilities and limitations of the different databases in order to get something that will give you something unique. So for me, and what I'm looking at, there is no database for. So I need to create one. And for, obviously there are some databases, let me be clear, and R Python is what most of them are in, because football has evolved differently for on-field performance analytics. Then, it's way later in the game than baseball. Baseball's been out there for a while. So there's super rich databases that exist in different languages, whereas football, we're kind of Wild Westing it, right? And we're creating our own. So for me, my unique flavor of what I add to this space is probably mostly my computer vision, which is TensorFlow, which requires Python, which also requires R. And then I've hooked in relational databases because for me and my ADD way of thinking about it, I need that ability to go back and forth. But that's for my content and for my personal Cynthia secret sauce, not for a, I'm not responsible for $1 billion P&Ls. I'm not responsible for, my AR, my account revenue, like all the accounts receivable and my revenue for my, like, that's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on telling you on the field how to get an edge to win a game or what potentially could happen. So I took those components, my computer vision, which is what I spent a lot of time learning, that makes me unique. So I'm in a different part of the value chain than other people. So where I'm saying is, whatever problem you're trying to solve, learn the code, or at least the capability limitations of the different types of code, so you can solve a unique problem, or solve the problem that your boss asks you, or solve a problem that you think. And I always phrase it in terms of solve a problem, because to me that means there's a need, right? If there's a problem, you need to solve it, right? So ultimately, it's matching what you're trying to do with how you're trying to do it. Make the process reflect reality.
Awesome. I think we're going to move on quickly to a quick speed round, and then we have some other questions that if we have time in the end, we have a bunch of great audience submitted questions.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite podcasts right now?
Well, I live alone and I'm single, so listening to all the murder podcasts that I've been doing is probably not a good thing. But I've listened to I go walking every morning and every night now, and I'm just listening to a different murder podcast. So it's been great. So Wondery, they have a lot of different murder investigation podcasts that they've done in the LA area, and they actually reference some bars that I've gone to. So I'm like, cool, this is great. This is wonderful. So that's me.
I'm so with you. I love good I love good murder. But lately, I've been listening to a lot. I listen to a lot of like various types of podcasts. I really like, I obviously like sports podcasts right now. interesting because there's not a lot going on. I typically I like Bill Simmons' podcast. I'm old school like that.
Same. I'm a big Bill Simmons fan.
I'm with you on the Wondery. If you're ever looking for, there's actually like some good sports one, like Business Wars, Sports Wars. There's a really good one I just listened to on Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, which is super. If you're into football, it's kind of timely because Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers are now in the same situation, right? So you can go listen to some of those. And I'm with you. The Sports Wars and the Business Wars, in addition to the other Wondery ones, are really good for the murder stuff. But I also, in terms of daily stuff, like I've been interested in kind of this finance, like how people are talking about finance who are a little bit younger. So I've also been listening to like this Snacks Daily podcast, which is like a 15-minute one that Robinhood Financial puts out. It's an interesting, it's a little like, you got to get over, like they have this like rap in the beginning, just fast forward through that and like listen to the stories that they tell you, because I like the way they synthesize complex financial issues. So if you're interested in just like a lightweight kind of entree to the financial market.
Yeah, I would also say JJ Redick has a great podcast where he's interviewed a bunch of people. That's one of my favorites as well. So if you're interested in basketball. What about book recommendations?
I'm always going to go back to Signal and the Noise, The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. I love everything that Nate Silver has put out. I'm more of a baseball girl than a football girl, even though I work in football now. So his PECOTA system that he built out to predict like people through the minor leagues of how they're going to perform like current MLB players. I think his book only has one chapter on actually the PECOTA system, but talks about predicting earthquakes and all of these different things. And it's just really interesting to see how he synthesizes data in a very succinct way with very real life recommendations. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, he's very politically active. So he's actually correctly guessed the winning of almost every single senatorial race based on the data that he's been pulling. So he's super interesting just to follow and to see all of his different information. So
I'm going to like stay on brand for this first one, but I just finished this book. It's called Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He's a little like British snarky humor in it, but it is super timely because it talks about like how like certain things are outside of the boundaries of like models and when they happen and whether people attribute to luck or to skill. It's actually like, it's kind of like a little scary just because of what's going on here in terms of like how stats can be like super misleading and people can tell the wrong story with them very easily. So beware, it puts you in a weird headspace maybe a little bit. I also it sounds dumb, but like I like my Brene Brown books because I ultimately think that the more you can connect with empathy and understand the role of empathy in your life and how you have to be able to relate to others. So anything, you don't necessarily need Brene Brown to do that, but like any book you read that helps you have a better version of empathy is a good read. And right now, especially, we're less connected in person. You don't get a chance to like read someone's body language as well. Like the Zoom screen is not this, it's not the same as being in the same room as someone. So especially if you're in tech, to me, cultivating my communication and empathy skills and really being able to translate that into some of the work that I do that is very, pattern focused and stronger in terms of like true technology, that has been super helpful for me. So right now, kind of doubling down on remembering how to, find empathy in emails, which can be very cold, has been a good lesson.
For sure. I feel like even when I make a joke, I always have to say, this is sarcasm, like, just so like, I'm like, is my joke funny? But, okay, we have time for a few audience Q&A, and then we'll send around the recommendations, and we had a lot of other great questions, so perhaps we could answer them in some sort of follow-up email just to be conscious of your guys' time. Lydia, do you want to start with the audience?
Yeah, sure. So our first question is, even in your current roles, what do you do to continue to educate yourself on analytics/tech side to keep up with technology evolving?
I do this.
Yeah, go for it. I think basically a lot of it actually comes to you. I think just in the role that I have, a lot of people who have come up with really cool tech things that they want to promote throughout the sports world, they actually just cold email you. So everyone's like, if everyone is selling tech on this call, like please don't all email me at once, but I do take take those cold emails and just do my own research back on what their platform is. So I want to just make sure that I know what's out there, because again, a lot of people want to make themselves known by being, we have big brands but small budgets, so it's very easy for them to come in and get a big win by signing the Rams on a new technology stack. So I actually get a lot of inbound, and then it makes me want to go see what their competitors are doing and see what's happening. So luckily for me, it comes to me, so I don't have to do a lot of outward research, but then I talk with all the other teams, and if they have a question about a platform, or if I have a question about a platform, we're just so interconnected that I feel comfortable being like, have you heard of this? Do you know about this? Are you doing something like it? And then it just gives me another reason to talk to my friends at the teams.
I do the same thing like I always did, which is like I very much I go to my school and ask. Kellogg has Kellogg the KIN, the Kellogg Innovation Network, which is ultimately like where entrepreneurs go to cultivate their new stuff. And I always look through that. I have friends at Techstars. I try to see like where are the cranes, what's being built where. And I also like surround myself. I'm super lucky that like I'm kind of an old lady, right? So like I have these friends who are smarter than me, and I've totally realized that it is very advantageous for me to like make sure that in who I spend time with and speak to and where my head is a place that brings out the best side of me in terms of looking and understanding new things, and even just hearing about something and exploring it and making sure like I'm kind of keeping up to date on it. People will take calls and listen to you and pitch you on things all the time, and being curious and making sure that curiosity, you have friends, I spend my time with my friends who bring out that curiosity in me and help me explore and understand it. Like I'm going to force, once this Corona is over, like Amy's hanging out with me. That's
I'm in. You let me know where to meet you.
Exactly. Like surround bring out that side of me, because I really like that side. I love being in tech. I love being in tech and sports. I'm lucky that I feel like this job is a dream because I get to do something that I love. So if you're not honoring that by like being curious in that space and I try to like help the younger people at the NFL Network or whoever tries to reach out, because I know they're going to need to employ me someday. So it's all selfish. I'm very selfish. Like I'll go have lunch with you. I'll go have a coffee with you and tell you everything you need to know, because you're going to have to hire me soon. I'm sure of it.
No, I love that. And you're right. It's so important to have a network. And I feel like just being a part of women's sports tech, it's exposed me to so much in the industry. So I'm very thankful. Our next question is, obviously you work with a lot of men, and shout out to the men on this call, Jacob and Scott. What can men do to support women in the sports tech industry?
And a shout out to Amir at Zoom for this question.
Sorry, I didn't see
that. Just to based on your career experience and in the industry, and what you've had, what can also people do to help future Amy's and Cynthia's?
Yeah, I think, both of my male employees are on this call right now, so I'm very thankful for them. But I think it is being okay with having a female boss. Being promoting them with like not trying to see them as an obstacle and actually working together. Letting them into meetings, even if you don't think that they're exactly, and like now I'm in too many meetings, but making sure that people are informed, because a different viewpoint is always necessary, especially on the language side of the lead generation. Of the way that you actually structure a survey could be very dominant in the way that you're leading them down a source. If you have a second set of eyes that say, you're already asking this question in a different way and trying to get a different outcome, like what are we going to do with that answer, just gives you more insight. So it's just different viewpoints. Like it could be age, race, gender, any of those things. Like having a more diverse culture around you and getting their input on it helps tremendously, because the market that you're trying to reach out to is completely diverse. And we are proving that women are watching sports, and it's not an anomaly. And we're right there with her on the men, and especially on the NFL side, we're the biggest growing demographic that we've been seeing in viewership. So you need to understand that it's not just us or them, it's all of us. Like we need everyone. So that's kind of where I think men can help a little bit more.
Honestly, to build off that was I agree. It has to be not just like female, but like a diversity of age, viewpoints, backgrounds, you know, all these different things. Like, you know how many people watch, in my case, the NFL and Amy's too, like, no, we don't all look the same. Like, you know, there's so many different people, and the best you can do, if you want to experience continued growth like we've had, you have to think super forward looking, because the kind of growth we've had and the expectations that our owners have, yeah, good luck anyone keeping up with that, right? Like, that's ridiculous. We've had explosive growth that's so hard to sustain. So you have to think differently and be ahead of it in terms of all sorts of thinking. But what I would say is, especially in like the technology and football, I can't speak as well to the other sports, but the technology and TV and football space, I think that treating the situation, making the younger people who come in, we get a lot of interns every year, being mindful about who their bosses are, who they are learning from, and how they're being taught. And when leaders are leading in any of these organizations, being mindful that you're going to have, as a leader, you're going to have deficiencies, but those shouldn't be like, oh gosh, like we've never had a woman in this room before. Like, I don't want to do it. Like, lean into that and say, okay, go ask the other women there, what could I have done? What could I do better to include your viewpoint? You know, just being a little more direct and open and honest about the conversation, as opposed to be like, we're doing a great job. We have these 3 women that we hired, you know, like instead of it being this weird thing, just being like, hey, how can we do better? How can we help you more? Just like you would do for any new hire, like any good leader would do. How can I empower you? But to everyone, it should be to the men, the women, all of the different people that come in. So then you can see who are the people that should be here because they're adding something, not just who are the women that we should hire for some situation. No, how do we find the best people, make them in the best situation to succeed, and then like, let them go. Like, I don't need to hold your hand after that.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I know we're running a little over. We just have a few more, two more questions. So a quick question for Cynthia. When making game time predictions, is it a strength to add a player's personal life activities to their career stats for stronger analysis?
No, I don't care what, I don't know. I guess I don't know what that means. Like their personal life, like, hey, this guy's a really good dude, so he's going to score a touchdown today. Like, for me, I'm trying to be unbiased, right? Like, my unbiased, I get a chance. There's 53 players on each roster. Like, we can go through, and when my producer and I are talking, they can be like, hey, there was a feature like 2 minutes ahead of here on Keenan Allen. Let's just keep it Chargers, right? And they'd be like, do you want to talk about Keenan Allen's touchdown? Sure. And then we can loop the story and like, hey, Keenan Allen, he likes to eat Dole bars at practice, and we just had this cool feature on them. Well, the Dole bar, he's going to get 2 today because he's going to score 2 touchdowns. Like, of course, you try to make the story fit the narrative of the show, but in reality, it's taking, here's your data menu, producer, love, and that's me trusting the producer, just like the producer has to trust me. Here's your menu of options. Let's pick the one that makes your show better, not let me try to fit, like, to show my range in telling the story, because to me, like, I'm on the TV, like, I have to be confident in the fact that, like, that we know my range, right? And now I have to trust my producer to pick the right story for the betterment of our show.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that what people don't maybe always understand is that the data, let's say, you know, it's really hard, or it's basically impossible to get unbiased data about someone's personality and what might make him work with somebody else on the field or on the court or wherever you are. So using that raw data actually helps us like see a lot of things that our own biases sometimes prevent us from seeing. And oftentimes, you know, someone on my team is here, he'll have this awesome insight based on his R modeling, not Python, but R modeling. And I think that a lot of times, you know, some of the people he shows it to will be like, oh, no, that can't happen. But then when you actually watch it, it's like, no, that is happening. You're just perhaps like biased based on a player's size or this or that. And maybe he's not the star that you think of, but he is really efficient. So that was really interesting. Amy, a quick question for you. How are SoFi Stadium team collaborating with Rams and Chargers and Hollywood Park to combine their customer data acquisition and journeys so that the project doesn't become another siloed experience for the visitor?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't know how much I can actually talk about it, but they are basically what we've been doing as the middleman between the two teams at the moment is been building out that recursory database of who's actually coming into the stadium. So because we sold seat licenses and 2 team suites, they're all coming from one repository where we know everyone who would be coming in the door as a long-term fan. So that's one way that we're doing it. The other way is that, I mean, there will be an app for SoFi Stadium that will be conjoined with Rams and Chargers apps. So as well as Ticketmaster. So there's a lot of different data points that we're looking into. We've hired Deloitte to help out with those big data problems. So those are kind of the ways that we're looking into it. But the other thing to consider is both teams, just because they're sharing a location doesn't mean you're going to get the same game day experience for both. They both have very different brand experiences. They have very different wants from what they want to show on an individual game. So their stage is the same, but the actors and the players are going to be completely different. So like seeing Hamilton versus Cats kind of thing, you know, like same stage, different players. So I think that's the other thing to really consider too, is that we want the fan to feel like it's a streamlined process, but also they're going to a Rams game, or they're going to a Chargers game, or they're going to a Kenny Chesney concert. Those are all very different experiences that we don't want you to feel like you're doing the same thing, parking in the same spot and getting the same food. We want to make sure that it is customized to you every time. And just, I mean, again, watching the Michael Jordan ESPN show, he plays like it's the only time that someone's ever going to watch him. So trying to act like every event that is at SoFi Stadium is going to be the only time that someone gets to experience our venue is kind of the mindset that you want to have of making it as best as you can for the actual event that's happening. So we do have a repository, and Deloitte's helping us with that, but also just tailoring it to what we know needs to happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Great. Well, thanks so much, Cynthia and Amy, for today. I'm definitely all inspired by your story, and we're just super thrilled to have this community here today. We do have a couple of action items for everyone. So everyone, if you can get out your phones, make sure to follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and then be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep you up to date on all of our events. And then make sure to spread the good word, share with your friends and coworkers. And then we do have an announcement. Unfortunately, we do have one of our WiST founders, Nina Luker. She's battling against non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the moment. So we have an awesome fundraiser going on right now where you can get a baseball cap. So we're going to put that link in the follow-up email so you can support her. And then next, we're going to take a picture if that's okay with everyone.
We have one. Mary Lou just told me about something awesome about some scholarships that I think everyone on here should hear about, because that was pretty awesome. She just told me that, so I hope I'm not blowing your cover, Mary Lou. Or was I not supposed to say it yet?
Mary Lou, do you want to chime in here and share the
Yes,
with
I just wanted to say we got a record number of WiST fellowship applications, and we're not going to announce until the 15th, but we're just out of our minds at how many we can do this year. So thanks for that shout out, Cynthia.
Good. I'm glad I didn't say anything, but I'm happy that it's good.
And then our last action item is we would love to take a picture of all our attendants today. So if you would like to be in the picture and turn on your camera, that would be awesome for everyone to share. If not, you can obviously turn off your camera. All right. Well, hopefully this wasn't sufficiently awkward. I always end up taking the screenshot and I put it on the big display so that I could get a bigger thing. But now I'm like, always look like I'm looking up. Thank you everyone for joining. We will follow up with a follow-up email. Again, thank you so much, Cynthia and Amy.
Thank you so much. This is amazing, you guys. And thanks for spreading the word about WiST to men and women. We'd love to have you all join us.
And we had a lot of questions we couldn't answer, but we really, really appreciate your time. Next time, hopefully we will continue to learn more about you guys and follow you guys in your careers. So we really appreciate it. You were fascinating. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody. Be well.